Hello again to our Armenian-American Perspective program. Today we have a very special guest. We have with us, along with Martin Harutyunyan, we have Dr. Vahe Gasparyan, who is in Yerevan currently. If those of you that are not familiar, Dr. Gasparyan is a heart surgeon with not only just a simple heart surgeon, he actually has techniques that, if Mr. Gasparyan can correct me if I'm wrong, that he has invented, for lack of a better word, that are being used currently. He has been in conferences and trainings throughout the world, from Singapore to the United States, and he is also a council member of the National Democratic Alliance. Good morning, Martin. Good afternoon, good day, Dr. Gasparyan.
Hello, thank you for inviting. Thank you. It's a pleasure.
I think the question for most Armenian Americans that are not familiar with your path to become at the forefront of the liberation of Armenia is, how does someone who is very busy, very specialized in his field and has done so much in his field, go from being a heart surgeon to becoming, like I said, at the forefront of the liberation movement, which I think is what we can call it to simplify it. So please, Dr. Gasparyan.
Yeah, I was forced to do that because back in 2020, when I did my military service in Syunik Zangezur Garrison Hospital during the 44 days war, I've seen all the casualties, and I heard the stories of the terrible stories of surrenders and traitors happened that time. I realized that we are living in a crucial and important and decisive moment of our history. And it became obvious to me that we have to change the whole system of the statehood here in Armenia. Otherwise, we're going to lose the sovereignty of the country and the statehood itself. So, although I love my specialty, I'm fond of it, and I miss my surgery, my job. But I realized that I can't do my surgery, realizing that my country is in a deep crisis. So, hopefully, I'll come back to my specialty the very next day when the country is saved and when the national government is formed. It's my obligation to help my colleagues in this national liberation fight. And I think it's an obligation of every Armenian human being currently.
So to paraphrase probably one of the most famous Armenian Americans, Monte Melkonyan, who has that famous recording when he says, "This is the time to leave everything. Leave your job, your family."
Exactly. You can't go to the operating room and do your surgery, realizing that something crucial is happening in the country at the same time. If you are compassionate, if you are a patriotic person, because I know many others who are living their comfortable life and who don't care about what's happening now in the country. But anyway, I'm not the person like this, so it was my decision.
Thank you for the discussion.
I love my I love my job, and I miss it every day. So I look forward to returning to my specialty once I'm able to do it.
Great. Well, Dr. Gasparyan, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. We really appreciate it. I think first and foremost, what is of interest to the American Armenian community right now is the current situation of what's happening in Armenia, especially in regards to Davush. In my conversations with the community members here in the Boston area, a lot of Armenian Americans are not aware of the current situation just because there aren't enough resources in the English language to make them aware of this. So if you could fill us in about what is going on there, I think that I hope you agree with me that I think that's the primary issue right now in regards to events in Armenia.
Yeah, what's happening now in Tavush region is part of the broad plan and scheme of the absorption of Armenia by Russian and Turkish allies. We call this Putin-Lavrov plan, which started back in 2016 during so-called 4 days war. But they failed to do it that time, and it was postponed. So they returned to the Lavrov plan back in 2020, and the 44 days war was just the beginning of the plan. The next steps are Armenia itself after Artsakh. Now is the turn for Armenia itself. And Azeris, Turkish, and Russians, they do their best to force Armenia to make a next surrenders, successions, either territorial or juridical in terms of the signing so-called peace treaty, peace agreement, which is in fact a capitulation agreement. And the final goal of the Lavrov plan is to force Armenia and to make it losing sovereignty and territorial integrity and prevent Western partners entering the region. So Tavush is crucial in this regard because this is not just the problem and the question of 4 villages. This is the question of the control over the state road connecting Armenia with Georgia, control over the gas pipeline, and over the large territory of Tavush and Lori region. So this is part of Armenian blockage, territorial, military, and economical blockage now from the northeast part of our territory. And the next will be Sunik. The next will be the village called Yerashavan, Tigranashen, which is important in terms of connecting Armenia with Zangezur, with Sunik. So this all these are the single are the parts of the single plan, Lavrov-Putin plan. And it's important to understand that Russian and Turkish allies, they started their job back in 1920 when joint Russian-Turkish aggression took place, and they occupied and annexed independent Armenian Republic back in 1920, and Moscow, so-called Moscow Treaty was signed at that time, which was illegal. And as you may know, and our audience, Armenian audience may know, this, according to Moscow Treaty, some territories of independent Armenian Republic were surrendered to Turkey, like Kars and Surmalu regions, and the others, like Artsakh and Nakhichevan, were donated or given to Azerbaijan. So they kept this status quo in the region for more than 100 years. And now they are doing their best to fix this juridically, or forcing Armenia to sign the so-called peace treaty and making those territorial surrenders. I think when calling on our Western partners, I would like to reiterate that they should change the whole perception of Armenia as a statehood. They should look at the Armenia not as a sovereign country which needs help and reforms, but they should finally realize that Armenia is not an independent state. Although formally it's considered to be an independent, formally, but in fact, Armenia is occupied and colonized country for more than 30 years, starting from the very first day of so-called independence back in 1991. And we call this hybrid occupation because there is a direct and indirect occupation of Armenia, direct in terms of the military base of the Russia in Gyumri, and indirect in terms of the collaborationist and colonial administrations ruling Armenian government. Presidents like Ter-Petrosyan, Kocharan, and Sarkisyan, the previous leaders, so-called leaders of Armenia, and the current one, which is prime minister, but again, puppet of the Kremlin. And this is the reality our Western partners should realize, and they should plan their steps, realizing this reality and considering those facts that I told you. Otherwise, we are going to fail, because this is, this is the most important and historic and crucial time of our modern history, and we have no right to make any mistakes anymore. When I say we, I mean Armenian people itself and our Western partners also. And I would like to say that the United States of America failed to take over Armenia 3 times before. First, it happened in 1920. Second time was 1991. And the third time was 1999, October 27. So now is the fourth and the last chance for the United States and our Western partners to proceed with the occupation of Armenia and helping Armenia to form the national government and to change its foreign policy vector, military vector, and helping Armenia to become a part of the civilized world. Thank you.
Dr. Gasparian, many in the diaspora bring up that point that, well, the West has betrayed us numerous times. How can we trust them again? And they also, many in the diaspora say, well, Russia is protecting our borders. We are lost without Russia. How do you address this?
Well, I would not call this betrayal. Look, what happened in 1920, the situation that time was not in favor of Armenia, because although we had our Western allies, United States, Britain, France, but that time the situation was that was not so favorable for us in terms of Bolsheviks and Turks entering the region, and the Western partners, they were tired of the war and they were leaving the region. Now is the totally different time and totally different situation, because now Russian Empire is weakening and is leaving the region first. And the second is that the Western partners are entering the region. They are coming in. They are not leaving the region. We can see these when we watch the statements and military help from the France, the statements of the United States, State Department, and other institutions. The second time in 1991, again, this was not the betrayal, but like it was illusion and delusion. The Western partners thought that the Yeltsin's Russia after the USSR collapse is a democratic country anymore, and the country that is not going to use the pressure on its neighbors, imperialistic policy towards its neighbors. So they left post-Soviet countries, post-Soviet republics, except Baltic states. They left them under Russian influence, and they left those countries become part of the CIS and CSTO, believing that the Russia is a democratic and fair country anymore. This was a mistake, not the betrayal. So I think the reality now is that the Western partners got the lessons from the mistakes in the past, and they realize now that the only solution is to help those countries colonized and occupied by Russia to get its real sovereignty. And in terms of Armenia, this is very important also because our Western partners have their strategic interest in the region in terms of the deterring Chinese economic expansion, in terms of deterring pan-Islamic and pan-Turkish plans of Turkey, Azerbaijan, and Pakistan, and in terms of north-south or south-north project connecting India and Iran with the Black Sea and with the Europe. So we have joint interests. Armenia and the Western partners, we have joint interests, and the national interest of Armenia and the people coincide with those of our Western partners. So this makes me optimistic now, unlike facts.
Now you're going to be going a lot. No, go ahead, Gokor.
I'm sorry, Martin, to follow up on your question. I know, and I'm sure Martin can attest to it, that there's a good portion of the Armenian-American community that believes that Nikol Pashinyan is Western-minded, and it is because of that that Putin is punishing us, because he's leaving Putin and he's going to the West. Can you say a few words to clarify that, please?
Okay, first I want to go back to the previous question regarding so-called protection of Russian forces, protection of our interests and our people. There is no protection. There was no protection. There is no protection, and there will be no protection from Russian side. And we have seen it so many times in the history, in 100 years ago, and in the 90s, and we have seen it now. Just recently, when there was an ethnic cleansing in Artsakh, Russians did nothing to help Armenians in Artsakh to survive.
The peacekeeping Russians.
So-called peacekeepers, yes, so-called peacekeepers. They, more than that, they helped Azeris to proceed with ethnic cleansing. And the same behavior we have seen during the 44 days war. I was one of the witnesses in Garrison Hospital in Sunik, and the soldiers and the officers of Armenian army, they told me the stories of Russian betrayals. Failed supply of the weapons, etc., etc. Many stories of their betrayals from the Russian side. So forget about Russian help and Russian support. There is a well-known proclamation, "We need Armenia without Armenians," stated by and made by Lobanov Rostovsky, who was the foreign minister of Russian government back in 19th century. So they followed those policy for more than 200 years of the colonization of Armenia, starting from Tsar time and coming to current days. So Armenian territory, people, and interests, Russians used only as a bargaining
tool, bargaining, yeah.
Bargaining coin for their policy, imperialistic policy. When coming back to the last question regarding so-called pro-Western policy of Pashinyan, this is a bullshit. Excuse me, but this is a bullshit. His Kremlin puppet is fully dependent person, and all the steps of Pashinyan, starting from 2018 and going to current days prove my statement about Pashinyan being a Kremlin puppet. He never did the realistic step towards the West, just the proclamation, declaration, just blah blah blah, just the words, but not a single step. He says Armenia is going to leave the CSTO, but we never see it. He says Armenia is asking Russian border officers to leave the Zvartnots airport. We never see it yet. He says we want to change our foreign policy vector, but still we are the members of all pro-Russian organizations. So, you know, those are the statements and the declarations just to manipulate, just to make an illusion, and make a political manipulation and imitation of changing the vector, just to keep its chair of the prime minister. I'm sure Pashinyan does realize that sooner or later Putin's regime will collapse, and he is now trying to save his position as a prime minister of Armenia at any cost. But on the contrary, we see the steps towards Turkey, we see the steps towards Azerbaijan, surrenders, successions, territorial, all those steps are real steps towards the Russian-Turkish allies and their plans and goals. So never trust Pashinyan and never believe his words and his statements. Kremlin brought Pashinyan to power back in 2018 and did its best to keep Pashinyan in power, because Pashinyan is the best tool possible for the Kremlin and for Baku and Ankara to proceed with Lavrov plan. And the Kremlin helped Pashinyan to recover and to be re-elected in those snap elections back in 2021, to continue the policy of so-called Lavrov plan. So now they need the last surrenders from Pashinyan, and only after that Pashinyan will go and the next puppet of the Kremlin will come. And this is again a well-written scenario and agreed with Pashinyan and Kremlin and Baku and Ankara. What we see now in Tavush is what I said. So Pashinyan will do last surrenders, and then Kremlin will organize some kind of state coup or insurrection in Armenia to change Pashinyan and bring another puppet. But this is not because Pashinyan is not serving Kremlin anymore. This is because he's finished anymore. He finished his mission, and he has to be changed. Like they changed Serge Sarkisyan in 2018, not because Sarkisyan was not the Kremlin agent, because his mission, his historic mission, was over, and they needed the new person, new instrument, and new tool to proceed with the Lavrov plan. You see what I mean? Because every historic period, Kremlin needs the tool, the instrument, the person suitable for that time.
A fresh face to fool the people again.
Yes, exactly, fresh face. Like they brought Ter Petrosyan to power, who is a KGB, well-known KGB agent, and this is documented, well-documented fact. They started the so-called independence of Armenia with Levon Ter Petrosyan, and then they needed to change Petrosyan and bring Kocharyan to power, because Petrosyan was not popular in the Armenian population that time anymore. So they need to change the regime. And then again, to change Kocharian with Serge Sarkisian, and then Serge Sarkisian with Pashinyan, and so on and so on. So this is a well-known policy. The only goal for the Kremlin is to keep the control over the Armenia and other countries like Georgia, Belarus, Ukraine, Moldova, and never let the people of this country make its sovereign choice and bring the person who is popular in the population. So the so-called Velvet Revolution in 2018 was false and well-written scenario revolution written in the Kremlin. And I think our Western partners should realize that they have no right to waver now, because if they will waver with changes in Armenia, they will have to force with the next state coup here in Armenia, and the next puppet will come to power, and it will be much more difficult to proceed with changes that time, because once the regime is changed, Kremlin will increase the control over the Armenia, and this is the very time for our Western partners to help NDA to proceed with uprise of Armenian people, to proceed with forming a national transitional government. We have to realize another very important thing, that for the countries like Armenia, Ukraine, for post-Soviet republics, if we want to change the system and we want to go from oligarchic, criminal, colonial system to the democratic one, we have to go through the transitional period. We have to go. There is no other way. No election, no reforms. If you look at the elections happened in Armenia and other countries in Soviet Union, you can't show me one example of the elections when there was a power change. Every time in all those elections in Armenia, the ruling regime reproduced itself. So we have to go through the transitional period and proceed with the transitional justice, illustration, to clear the political, economical, and military field of our country from the agents, from Russian and foreign agents. And only after that, when you have a sovereign political field, you have adopted a new constitution with the balanced branches of the power. You have to go. You can think about the new elections, snap elections, transparent elections, free elections, etc. But first of all, transitional period. No other way, no other choice.
Dr. Gasparian, we know that you're going to be going live in a little bit to address the Armenian people in the Armenian language. Could we just get a quick summary of what you're going to be talking about for our English-speaking audience?
Yeah, I will update my audience, Armenian people, on the recent developments in Tavush, in Russia, about terroristic attack, etc. I will update our Armenian population about my vision of the next events which are going to happen inside the Kremlin in Russia and the Ukraine battlefield, because what's happening there is important to us, because weakening of the Putin's regime is the only precondition and prerequisite for us to be able to deoccupy our country. And my message will be that the momentum of the momentum of truth is coming, because Putin's regime is weakening every day on the daily basis. And once Putin's regime is collapsed, we have to go on the street and to proceed with the occupation of our country. So weakening or collapse of the Putin's regime first, then uprise of Armenian people second, and help from the Western partners third, in terms of deterring police here in Armenia, in terms of calling police and special services here in Armenia to refrain from violence. Because, you know, they used the force, brutal force, against peaceful protesters for more than 30 years during the last years of our modern history, because they knew that the Russian leader Vladimir Putin is supporting them and is helping them and is covering them. So once the Putin's regime is collapsed, they will not, I hope they will realize that their brutal regime days is over anymore. But again, Western partners should call on them, remind them, and make a strong, send a strong message to police here in Armenia to refrain from violence, because a National Democratic Alliance is going to deoccupy Armenia from Russian occupation using civil disobedience as a tool, as a method, which is civil, not forceful, but civil, but disobedience method of protest. And this is every right of every people to go to the street, to use its sovereign rights and power, because the people of each country is the real host of its statehood. But Western partners should support us, like they did in Georgia, in Ukraine, during Maidan before, to deoccupy Armenia. And if once this is done, Armenia will become reliable, trustful, and committed partners of the European Union, of the United States, of Western partners here in South Caucasus, which is very important for our Western partners, because this region is one of the most important regions for the Western partners to deter Chinese expansion. And a former speaker of the United States House Speaker, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, if you remember, when she has visited Armenia back in 2022, she put Armenia in one row together with Ukraine and Taiwan. So United States does realize the fact that Armenia is a very much important country, but only realizing is not enough. We will need their support when the time will come, when the X momentum will come.
And we have a few minutes left, and I wanted to touch again on the Tavush region. Also, I think a misnomer that the Nikol Pashinyan regime and Nikol Pashinyan apologists are trying to convey to the people, saying that, oh, it's not really villages, it's just a few rocky places that don't matter. That's what we're giving. And also, Dr. Gasparyan, if you can touch on the importance of Voskepar, which is one of the regions which, as we know, in 1991, when the so-called ring operation, Kaltso Operacja, what the Russians did over there and what's happening now. In just a few minutes, Dr. Gasparyan.
So Kaltso operation, which was the Russian operation back in 1991, it started from Voskepar village and ended with ethnic cleansing in Shaumian and Getashen. So again, about so-called Russian support and Russian help. They helped Azeris to proceed with ethnic cleansing of Getashen and Shaumian. This is not the question of just a small 4 villages. This is the question of total control of the gas pipeline, of the state road connecting Armenia with Georgia. So this is part of the blockage of Armenia, as they want to blockade us, closing the Mehri corridor. opening Zangezur corridor and blocking us from Iran. Now they are proceeding with blocking Armenia from Georgia, which is essential in terms of connecting with Black Sea and Europe. So this is the huge, dangerous surrender succession. And when Pashinyan says to the people that this is a small thing, he's just lying and he's manipulating, and he's son of the beach. He's a betrayal. We have to proceed with removal of this guy. He crossed all the red lines and he has no right to stay in power. And we have to do our best to remove him from power, to remove him from his chair of the prime minister soonest possible. And we hope our Western partners will help us, because this is, again, in the interests of the West itself also. Thank you.
And lastly, to remind our viewers, since this was a very special program with Dr. Gasparyan's words, please share this to get this out to the Armenian-American community that has limited resources, and they mostly hear what the Pashinyan propaganda machine is passing on to the United States. So this is alternative news. These are more on the ground. Please share this. And with just 1 minute, Dr. Gasparyan, if you can tell us, what can the Armenian-American community do? I know number one, you're going to say is to come to Armenia, but as you may know, some are limited in that. What would be the second thing they can do?
Number one, to come to Armenia and physically be with us. Number second, help us psychologically, help us financially, and help us to broad the ideas and the ideology of the NDA all over the world, and help us to get well contacted with our American partners. I would be more than pleased to have a chance to visit Washington and meet with our Western partners from the State Department, from Congress, from House. So any kind of help, any type of help is much appreciated from Armenia.
And just to remind our viewers, if they do want to help financially, Gokor, can you remind us the best way to do that?
Yeah, and also as a reminder to see what the National Democratic Alliance's roadmap is, the plan. They do have a website that is in Armenian as well as in English. It's pretty thorough. It's ajbever.com, which is ajbever.com. And there's also a link over there where you can donate. And one thing to add is that they have been on the ground now. It's into their 8th month. And those people need everything from just shelter to food to just to stay afloat, to keep the fight going. They have not once in the last 9 months retracted. So please go to the website and help. And once again, thank you, Dr. Gasparyan.
Thank you, Dr. Gasparyan.
And we look forward to your live in Armenian.
Thank you very much. We will win. No doubt about it.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.